In this video, I'm going to discuss the audit risk model, and we're starting right now. What's up? My name is Ron from the CPA Recipe, and I'm a certified public accountant and also a former external auditor. If this is your first time in this channel and if you're looking for fun, engaging, and easy to understand tutorial videos about accounting and related topics, you've come to the right place. So start now by hitting the like button, sharing this video on your timeline, and hitting the subscribe button and bell notification icon so you won't miss anything. Now, as I've said earlier in this video, I'm going to discuss kung ano ba ang audit risk model, and this is gonna be legend, wait for it, dairy. As I have said in the previous episode of this auditing theory series, an auditor only gives a reasonable level of assurance. Meaning bro, the level of assurance is less than absolute or less than 100%. Ang auditor bro, pwede yang magkamali. Maaaring ang i-express na opinion ng isang auditor, for instance, ay unqualified opinion. Pero in fact, the financial statements are materially misstated. Remember, sabi natin the level of assurance is less than 100%. Ibig sabihin bro, for instance, if the level of assurance is 98%, ibig sabihin bro, there is the 2% chance na ang isang auditor ay makapag-issue ng maling opinion regarding the financial statements. Yung 2% na ito bro, ito yung tinatawag natin na audit risk or yung risk na baka mali ang opinion na mamigay ng auditor. Bro, so what kung mag-issue ng maling opinion ng auditor? Well, dahil ang role ng isang auditor ay mag-provide ng assurance, ibig sabihin bro, ang isang auditor dapat yan reliable or a person na you can trust. Now, if an auditor would be issuing an incorrect opinion, makakaapekto ito sa reputation or public image ng isang auditor. Especially since hindi naman lahat ng tao bro ay naiintindihan ang concept ng reasonable assurance. Now, may mas malala pa dyan bro. Kasi remember, maraming users of the financial statements ang nagre-rely sa opinion ng auditor. At malaking pera ang pinag-uusapan dito bro. So there is a risk of a lawsuit against the auditor or possible na makasuhan or ma-involve sa isang litigation case ang isang auditor, and of course, payment of damages. But wait, there's more. Eto bro, mas malala pang consequence. Yung image or yung trust ng public sa profession itself maaari ding maapektuhan. At dahil malaki nga ang consequences ng pag-i-issue ng maling opinion, pero at the same time naman, hindi naman natin possible na ma-achieve ang 100% or absolute assurance, then the best way to go for an auditor is to minimize the audit risk to an acceptable level. So now bro, how can an auditor minimize risk to an acceptable level? Dito ngayon papasok ang tinatawag natin na audit risk model. Now, to illustrate, habang bumababa ang assurance, tumataas ang risk. At vice versa bro, habang tumataas ang assurance, bumababa ang risk. Now, the objective of the auditor bro is to have that level of assurance na confident siya na tama yung klase ng audit report na inisyu niya. This of course will depend sa professional judgment ng isang auditor kung ano ba yung acceptable level para sa kanya. Let's say for instance, ang acceptable level of assurance for me is 95%. In such case, meron akong 5% acceptable audit risk. Kapag naman ang acceptable assurance level ay 90%, the acceptable audit risk is 10%. So theoretically, they equal 100%. However bro, the problem is that the audit risk is not immediately equal to the acceptable audit risk by default. The objective of the auditor here is to determine the overall audit strategy in order to reduce the audit risk to an acceptable level, which is yung tinatawag nga natin na acceptable audit risk. Now, there are three factors affecting the audit risk, at according to the audit risk model, ito ang formula ng audit risk. Audit risk equals risk of material misstatement times detection risk. Ibig sabihin bro, ang risk na magkamali ng opinion ng auditor ay influenced by two things. Una, yung probability na may material misstatements sa financial statements, either due to error or fraud, or Risk of Material Misstatement or in short, ROMM or ROMM. At pangalawa, yung probability na hindi ito makita or ma-detect ng auditor o yung tinatawag natin na detection risk. So unahin muna natin yung Risk of Material Misstatement. As mentioned, ito yung risk na may mali sa financial statements. Material meaning may impact sa decision making ng users ang misstatements na ito. Now, bakit magkakaroon ng material misstatements sa financial statements? Well, either due to error or fraud. Now, the risk of material misstatement can still be broken down into two components. Ano yung two components na yun, bro? Ito yung tinatawag natin na inherent risk at yung control risk. So now, we can express the formula for audit risk as audit risk equals inherent risk times control risk times detection risk. So let's discuss these two components of risk of material misstatements one by one. So now, unahin muna natin yung inherent risk. Ano ba yung tinatawag na inherent risk? From the word inherent, meaning bro, natural na siya sa isang bagay or kumbaga, the risk exists due to the very nature of the cause of the risk. For example bro, may mga accounts kasi at accounting treatments na by their very nature, prone to material misstatements. Now, bakit sila prone to material misstatements? Anong example ng mga to? For instance bro, revenue. Especially if may kakaibang revenue recognition practice ang isang entity. For instance, yung mga construction revenues na ginagamitan ng judgment kung ano na ba yung percentage of completion. Another example bro, yung may mga complex accounting measurement kagaya ng pension liability. Another example bro, yung mga non-recurring transaction or one-time transaction kagaya for instance bro, nagkaroon ng fire loss during the covered period. Syempre diba kung maaalala mo yung intermediate accounting mo, meron yang estimation for inventory fire loss, yung ginagamitan ng gross profit method at retail method. Kung hindi mo pa yan alam bro, check mo yung tutorial video ng aking good friend, si Accounting Iksi Simplified. Meron siyang video about dyan, no? Nilagay ko sa description sa baba. So going back, definitely bro, estimate yan. Hindi mo naman pwedeng i-expect na yung amount of inventory fire loss, bibilangin mo kung ilang kilo yung abo. So now, yung mga ganyang accounting treatments na nagre-require ng estimates and judgments, very risky yan na magkamali. Kasi no matter how scientific the process of estimation is, an estimate is an estimate. So ano pa ba yung mga accounting treatments or accounts na possibly may mataas na inherent risk? Investments, especially the ones na measured using fair value. So depende sa business ng entity. So again, to reiterate, ang inherent risk ay yung risk of material misstatement na natural sa financial statements due to reasons like complexity of accounting treatments, use of estimation and judgments, and significant volume of transactions prior to consideration of internal controls. So next, ano naman yung tinatawag natin na control risk? Ang control risk ay yung risk na although may internal controls in place na designed and implemented by management, hindi nito mapiprevent, madidetect or makokorek ang errors or fraud na potentially mag-cause ng material misstatement sa financial statements. Ang internal controls kasi bro, hindi naman yan 100% na nakaka-prevent or nakaka-detect ng errors. Ang isang entity kasi ay may kino-consider din yung constraints when designing and implementing internal controls. For instance bro, let's say na to ensure that the cash in bank balance of the entity is correct, they perform monthly bank reconciliation. Now, in this case, the performance of the bank reconciliation is an internal control. Now, ang sinasabi sa control risk, although merong internal control, possibly itong internal control na ito ay hindi niya ma-prevent, ma-detect or ma-correct ang material misstatement. This is highly likely especially bro kung ang pinag-uusapan natin ay fraud since there is an intention to deceive. O kaya naman, baka kasi the control is inadequately designed or not properly implemented. For instance, baka kasi yung nagpe-prepare ng bank reconciliation, siya lahat ang may hawak ng asset custody and record keeping functions. Tapos, siya pa yung nagbabank reconciliation. So there are really cases na although may internal controls in place, meron pa ring material misstatement. So now, The last factor sa audit risk model ay yung tinatawag natin na detection risk. Ano naman yung detection risk? Ito naman bro, yung risk na although nag-perform ng audit procedures ang auditor ay hindi niya ma-detect ang material misstatement. Bakit naman ito nangyayari? Well, mayroong dalawang reason bro. Ito yung sampling risk at non-sampling risk. Ganito kasi yan. Sa audit bro, hindi kasi natin chinecheck lahat ng transactions. Sampling basis lang tayo bro. For instance, a company has 100,000 sales transactions during the year and you want to verify if these sales transactions actually occurred. Hindi mo i-check ang lahat ng sales invoices na yan bro. Baka matabunan ka na ng invoice. So ang ginagawa ng auditor ay nagsasampling basis lang. Kumukuha ka lang ng samples from the population. And I'm sure na encounter mo na ang sampling sa iyong statistics na subject. Now, dahil nagsasampling lang ang auditor, there is that likelihood na baka yung error or yung fraud ay nandoon sa transactions or sa invoice na hindi mo napili as sample. In such case, hindi mo siya talaga madidetect. Ito yung tinatawag natin na sampling risk. Now, for the non-sampling risk naman bro, papasok naman dito for instance yung selection of inappropriate procedures. For instance bro, no, according kasi sa iyong initial assessment of risks, sapat na ang analytical procedure. Pero hindi pala siya sapat. Kailangan mo pala ng mas detailed na audit procedures. O kaya naman bro, possible din na tama naman yung audit procedures na nagawa mo. Pero hindi mo pala na-interpret ng tama yung results. 'Di ba? Tao lang bro, nagkakamali rin ang auditor. Now, of these three factors affecting audit risk, ang detection risk lang ang kayang maimpluwensyahan ng auditor. Now, bakit ito lang ang risk na kayang maimpluwensyahan ng auditor? I-discuss ko yan sa susunod na section kung saan ituturo ko sa iyo kung ano ba ang significance at correlation ng audit risk, inherent risk, control risk, at detection risk. Now, balikan natin yung formula natin kanina, which is audit risk equals inherent risk times control risk times detection risk. So, recap muna tayo ng konti bro. Audit risk is the risk na baka mali ang opinion na mabigay ng auditor. At ang risk na ito na baka magkamali ang auditor sa ibibigay niyang opinion ay affected by three factors or three risks. Namely, yung inherent risk or the natural risk na may mali sa financial statements due to complexity of accounting treatments, volume of transactions, reliance on estimates and judgments, etc. Next, yung control risk naman or the risk na hindi ma-prevent, ma-correct or ma-detect ng internal controls ang significant errors or fraud sa financial statements. And lastly, yung detection risk na although nag-perform naman ng audit procedure si auditor, baka hindi niya ma-detect yung material misstatements na whether due to error or fraud. Now bro, ano ba ang essence ng audit risk model at ng mga risks na ito? Now, sabi ko kanina, malaki ang impact at madaming consequences kapag ang auditor ay nagkamali ng opinyon na ibibigay as to the fairness of the presentation of the financial statements. Now, dahil dito, the objective of the auditor is to express his opinion at a point in which the risk of a wrong opinion being issued is minimal or at an acceptable level. Now, paano ngayon ito gagawin ng auditor bro? Let's say for example, kung ako yung auditor bro, definitely I would want the audit risk to be as minimal as possible. So for instance, I want to be 99% sure na tama ang aking opinion. 99% parang sabon lang no, patay ang 99% ng germs except yung makulit na 1%. Ibig sabihin for me bro, the acceptable audit risk is 1% or there is that 1% chance na baka magkamali ako. So da bro, i-plot natin ito sa audit risk model. So the acceptable audit risk is now set at 1%. Now, as discussed earlier, the audit risk is influenced by the risk of material misstatement, which is broken down further into the inherent risk and the control risk. Now, itong inherent risk and control risks bro, there is nothing that the auditor can do about them because they are a function of the audit client. Ano ba yung business niya? Ano ba yung environment ng business niya? And therefore, ano ba yung accounting standards na applicable sa kanya as well as the laws and regulations? Ano ba yung internal controls na designed and implemented by the audit client's management? Lahat ng yun bro, hindi yun hawak ng auditor. Now, kung di yun hawak ng auditor bro, so anong ilalagay natin na values dito ngayon sa ating formula? It will depend on the preliminary assessment of the auditor. Ang inherent at control risk ay hindi control ng auditor. The auditor can only assess. So paano niya to i-assess ngayon, bro? Dito papasok, bro, yung mga procedures na tinatawag nating risk assessment procedures. So nandito, for example, yung inquiries and interviews with management and other key personnel ng audit client. Yung analytical procedures. So ito naman yung, for instance, pwede mong i-analyze yung trend from the previous year's financial statements versus the current year's trial balance. Baka kasi may mga significant changes. Tapos yung changes na yon, pwede mo yun ikumpara sa economic condition ng industry. If nag-a-align ba sila o kaya naman mag-vertical analysis ka. For instance, tumaas yung sales nila for the current year pero bumaba yung cost of sales and many more. Also, pwede ka rin mag-perform ng observation ng operations ni audit client. Panoorin mo yung control environment nila. Paano ba sila mag-work? Tapos mag-perform ka ng inspection ng documents and records nila. Makikita mo dyan, bro, if meron bang segregation of duties. And also, you can verify if yung mga sinabi ba sa'yo ng mga in-interview mo ay actually ginagawa nila sa kanilang daily operations. So now, let's say na na-assess mo na ang inherent at control risk. So let's assume na based on your assessment, there is a 90% chance that the financial statements are materially misstated. So i-plot natin under inherent risk, 0.9. Now, of course, hindi ito basta pag-plot lamang ng percentages, bro. Kailangan na well-documented ang mga ginawa mong risk assessment procedures at ang mga results ng mga procedures na ginawa mo in order to support your assessment that the inherent risk is at 90%. Now, of course, obviously, bro, the auditor needs to use his professional judgment in this assessment. Now, for the control risk, bro, here is the catch. Ang control risk ay assessed yan, bro, at 100%. Except, uulitin ko ha, ang control risk ay assessed at 100% except if magre-rely ka sa internal controls. Magre-rely ka sa internal controls meaning, bro, based on your assessment of the controls relevant to the financial reporting ay appropriately designed, consistently implemented at operating effectively ang internal controls. Ibig sabihin, based on your assessment, naniniwala ka na kayang ma-prevent, ma-detect or ma-correct ng internal controls ang errors or fraud na may material impact sa financial statements. Now, bro, itong assessment mo na to ng control risk below 100%, syempre kailangan documented din yan. Hindi yan basta trip mo lang na i-assess na below 100%. Now, ano itong documentation na ito? Ito yung tinatawag na test of design and implementation of the internal controls. Maraming auditor, bro, na ang tawag dito, bro, ay TODI or DNI simply. So ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng design and implementation? Design meaning kung paano ba ginagawa yung internal control. Paano ba niya na-address yung risk of material misstatement? At yung implementation naman, ibig sabihin kung ginagawa ba ang control as intended. Kasi pwedeng appropriately design ng controls pero iba pala pagdating sa implementation or baka hindi nila ginagawa at all. Ito yung tinatawag din ng ibang auditors, bro, na test of one transaction. Meaning, mag-audit ka ng isang transaction para makita mo kung yung control ba ay implemented as designed. So now, sufficient na ba na audit evidence ang test of one transaction? Definitely, bro, hindi. So kung okay ang design ng control at consistent naman ang implementation nito, gagawin mo ngayon yung tinatawag natin na test of operating effectiveness of controls. Now ito, bro, dito naman magsasampling ka naman ng testing ng controls. Ibig sabihin, kung gusto mong i-assess ang control risk at less than 100%, kailangan mong gawin ang test of design and implementation or TODI at test of operating effectiveness or TOE. Pero kung i-assess mo naman siya na 100% by default, kailangan mo lang ng documentation ng understanding ng internal controls. Now, meron na tayong acceptable audit risk, inherent risk at control risk. So, paano naman natin mako-compute ang detection risk? Now, sa detection risk, bro, dito natin malalaman kung ano ba ang magiging approach natin sa pag-audit. Meaning, ano ba yung nature, timing, and extent of audit procedures na kailangan gawin ng isang auditor para ma-achieve niya yung kanyang acceptable audit risk. For instance, in our example, dahil 0.9 ang inherent risk at let's say the control risk ay 1, para ma-maintain ng auditor ang audit risk sa level na acceptable na in this case, para sa kanya which is 1%, Ibig sabihin bro, dapat ang detection risk nasa 1.11% lang dapat. Ibig sabihin bro, dapat ang detection risk ay ma-maintain or ma-achieve at 1.11% lang dapat. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin, si auditor dapat ang confidence level niya sa procedures na gagawin niya ay nasa 98.89%. So bro, paano yan ma-achieve ng auditor? Dito papasok yung audit approach, which is yung nature, timing, and extent of audit procedures. Nature, meaning bro, ano bang klase ng procedure ang gagawin? Analytical lang ba or test of details? Or kailangan ba mixture of both? Timing, ibig sabihin, kailan mo gagawin ang procedure? Dapat ba closer to year-end? Or pwede na kahit malayo sa year-end, meaning interim procedures? Extent naman bro, meaning gaano kadaming evidence ang kakailanganin mo. So for instance, kung kailangan mo ng mataas na assurance level from the audit procedures, ibig sabihin bro, dapat mas mabusisi ang procedure mo. So sa test of details ka dapat. Tapos closer to year-end mo siya gagawin, at lastly, madami kang sample size. Don't worry, mas i-discuss ko in detail ang iba't ibang audit approach in a separate video. Pero for now, ang concern muna natin ay ano ba ang audit risk model at para magkaroon ka ng overview ng pagbuo ng overall audit strategy. So alternatively, kung nagkataon naman na ang detection risk na kailangan ay mababa lang para ma-maintain ang acceptable audit risk, pwede na hindi masyadong mabusisi yung nature ng procedures. Pwedeng may interim procedures and then yung sample size mo or yung amount of evidence, pwede mo na sigurong babaan. And that's it for this video bro. I hope marami kang natutunan. If you learned and liked what you saw, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, share this video to your timeline, and hit the subscribe button and bell notification icon para lagi kang updated pag may bago akong video. Also, if you have feedback, questions, or suggestions, feel free to comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Again, my name is Ron, Certified Public Accountant, and see you in another episode for Legend. Wait for it, Derry.